Hey, what's up guys? JQ back with Tech Creation, where I use technology for recreation. So it's been about 3 months since the OnePlus 7 Pro has been out, and you guys kept requesting this on the channel, so I finally caved in and bought one, making this my first OnePlus device like ever. So the reason Chinese smartphones never really appealed to me is because they always seemed subpar compared to the feature set of the mainstream flagship smartphones that we're used to. But the OnePlus 7 Pro changed my mindset completely, and this phone is everything that I want a smartphone to be, with the exception of a few things, or maybe just one thing. So beginning with the design, I don't like using cases or skins, so it's important to me how a phone looks, and this nebula blue color is so sexy to look at, especially when light hits it. That dark blue to light blue gradient they got going on looks incredible. So that's number one. Number two, the texture of the back doesn't collect fingerprints as much, at least. Maybe a couple of smudges here and there, but for the most part it's virtually maintenance free, and it's not as slippery as most other smartphones that I've used. Now when you combine that with its thin form factor and this gorgeous QHD AMOLED display that's free of camera cutouts, I mean, this is just nothing but screen. It's literally a total design package in my book. And coming straight from the iPhone, this display is just something else. It scores an A+ according to DisplayMate, and I really don't doubt that because I just often find myself stuck. Mesmerized is the word that I'm looking for. Movies, YouTube videos, and wallpapers, all of which are sort of like these automatic, impulsive things that you sort of have to do once you pick up this phone. And I just can't express enough how refreshing it is to not see any camera hole cutouts anywhere on the screen. And it just feels so good to be back on Android. Now, OnePlus did a phenomenal job with the in-display fingerprint sensor. I mean, unbelievable speed and accuracy, unlocking in just 0.21 seconds. And that celestial animation looks cool as hell. If you guys know me by now, you know that I like space, galaxy type stuff. So this falls right up my alley, and I can always appreciate small details like that. Now that same speed carries over to the UI itself with Oxygen OS, and this is where I finally see what the big deal was with this phone, and there's really no other way to put it, but this phone is fast as hell. And I know that sounds cliche because every smartphone that comes out holds that title, but like this phone is on a different level. And a lot of that also has to do with the 90 Hz refresh rate on the screen. I mean, everything is just so smooth. It's like there's no buffer or stutter between actions, transitions, menus, none of that stuff. Everything just appears upon tapping. Instant gratification on overdrive. So this particular unit has 8 GB of RAM, but it's also available with 12 GB of RAM. And I can't even imagine how much faster that would be. But honestly, I really don't even think it's necessary. And this actual same 8 GB model only retails for $700, which is great when you compare it to all of the other $1,000 flagship smartphones floating around. Now, a couple small things I like about Oxygen OS is how the media output settings is baked right into the volume slider. That's come in handy for me several times, but I'm really not feeling this dedicated hardware silencer button. I never liked it on the iPhone, and I don't like it now. Not only do I keep reaching for it thinking it's the power button, but for some reason every time I take it out of my pocket, it's switched over to a different profile. I don't know if it's the way that I'm pulling it out of my pocket or whatnot, but it's just something I just never got used to. I wish they would have just moved it to the other side, or just got rid of it altogether and moved the power button a little bit higher. That's just my personal preference, but it's definitely not a deal breaker. Oxygen also features gesture shortcuts, like a 3-finger swipe down for screenshots. I use this like every day. I love this gesture. And although I don't use it, this lets you assign apps or shortcuts to trigger whenever you finger draw any of the letters O, V, S, M, W. And the only caveat here is that it appears to only work when the screen is off. So you can't really take full advantage unless you have the lock screen security disabled, because some apps do require permissions to open. So the only one that I use is the letter V to launch the camera, since for me it's the easiest to gesture, and it launches the camera regardless of the lock screen security. And as for Android Pie's native navigation gestures, I prefer the setting back home with a swipe up on the home button. Not only for me is this easier and more intuitive to do, but I just prefer seeing visual indicators. Plus it just gives you deeper customization of the home button, which I have assigned to activate split screen on a long press for whenever I want to multitask. I found that to be real convenient. And then I have it to launch OnePlus's shelf feature with a double tap, which, speaking of, the shelf feature in Oxygen OS It's similar to what Samsung does with Bixby, and it also reminds me a lot of the iOS's Widget Center, which I happen to be a big fan of, as this allows you to add supported widgets, tools, or information cards whenever you swipe over to the right. You can reorganize and resize the items to your liking, and I found myself actually using it on a regular basis. And you can always disable it from the home settings if you want, where you'll find a couple more tricks, like double tapping to lock the device, which is perfect in case if your power button is ever broken or defective, you have a way to lock your phone, which I think think is actually kind of smart. I know some third-party apps offer that feature already, but it's nice to have it stock right out the box. Also, familiar settings that you'll find in most Android launchers, like changing the icon size and the grid layout, as well as applying your favorite third-party icon pack, which all of these settings I just leave on default. The only thing I did was I went ahead and applied dark mode under the theme settings because, I mean, who doesn't love dark mode? Everything just looks a lot better. It darkens up everything around the phone, and for me, it just has better contrast and it's easier on the eyes. Now, here's a feature that I don't really hear brought up too much in the OnePlus conversation, and that's OnePlus's support for aptX audio, which is a wireless codec that provides very high quality sound over the standard Bluetooth codec. And I only realized this when I was using my Sennheiser Momentums, which, by the way, a lot of people aren't aware, these are one of the very few truly wireless earbuds that supports aptX audio. So when paired together with the OnePlus, you get this Qualcomm aptX watermark that appears on the screen, and I'm telling you guys, the music just sounds so damn good. I mean, the only reason I'm mentioning is because it was that distinguishable coming from the iPhone that a non-audio expert like myself was able to notice it, and that says a lot. So for any music lovers out there, I can highly recommend the OnePlus 7 Pro as your next device. Just make sure you're paired to something that supports aptX audio. Now that brings me to the camera, and this is where things become a little more humble. First off, let me just say that this retractable camera is one of the coolest things I've seen in a while. So cool to look at, and regardless of how you feel about moving parts on a smartphone, the advantage is that you get obviously much better selfies, and that's important because that's where a lot of phones suffer from, even with high-end smartphones like the Galaxy S10. It's super high quality selfies at 16 megapixels, which makes it great for when using portrait mode, which, by the way, does a pretty good job in daylight. Now on the back, you get the familiar triple camera setup that we see a lot, with the main camera being a 48 megapixel camera, but this is only when you're shooting in pro mode and selecting the center option, because otherwise it'll shoot in 12 megapixels only, and that's a huge difference, and I thought it needed to be clarified because it's not exactly obvious right off the back. And it goes without saying that this setting will give you much higher resolution photos. I just wish that it shot at 48 megapixels all of the time. And aside from that, don't get me wrong, this is a great photography camera. I was able to capture some beautiful night and day photography, and I was really impressed with the camera's nightscape shooting mode and how it adds so much character and vibrance to low light shots by using high dynamic range. And you know, sometimes I don't mind this artificial look. I think it looks very stylish, and it actually made me want to take more night shots. The only thing is that nightscape doesn't work so good for low light portraits. As you can see just how over processed and disgusting my face looks in this shot. Almost looks like a cartoon character. Looks terrible in my opinion. And the same is true for low light portrait shots on the main camera. The shots kept coming out very soft and detailed, and it kept getting the shirt in focus despite 8 different attempts to focus on my face. And overall, I've just seen better results in portrait mode from all other flagship smartphones. So yeah, I'm just not confident in using the main camera for portraits, but I would rather use it for object or landscape photography instead. The good news is though, that's probably like my only -1 about the OnePlus, because as far as the battery life is concerned, incredible. With its 4,000 milliamp hour battery, I'm getting around 6 hours on average of on-screen time, which is impressive considering such a high resolution display and the fact that the majority of my use came from watching YouTube videos, which uses up a considerable amount of battery. And I just honestly never found myself in a situation where it died before I expected to. That's always the worst when that happens. And what's even better is that with OnePlus's Warp Charge 30, this power supply charges your OnePlus device at 30 watts, which according to OnePlus is the fastest charging technology that's available at the time of this video. And it only took me 1 hour to get from 25% to 100%. I mean, there's really nothing more I have to say or elaborate on that. So to wrap this up, if this phone had the Pixel's camera type of quality and wireless charging, this would be the perfect smartphone. It's always a good thing when a smartphone makes you forget about features that you wanted in other smartphones because you're just so satisfied using it. Moving forward, I would now have an open mind to these Chinese smartphones and budget smartphones as well. All right, you guys already know what to do. Let me know what you guys agree or disagree with, or how do you feel about this phone in general? Drop those comments down below, but only after you show some love to that like button. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe and turn on the alerts. This way YouTube notifies you whenever I drop another awesome tech video. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.